we are again. Welcome to today's show. What's going on, Shane? How you doing today, bro?
Doing pretty good. Trying to stay warm, trying to stay healthy. It's that season right now. It's been cold in North Carolina, cold in Georgia, and the flu seems to be running rampant. So, between all of that, just trying to stay feeling good and not lose a week's worth of work.
I know for sure. Well, it's great. You guys are getting all the snow, and on the West Coast, they're getting none of the snow they normally get, like up in the mountains, and it's like we're breaking records in all the wrong ways.
Yeah, because we are not equipped to deal with snow and ice in Georgia and in North Carolina. Not really. At least not
Right.
in Charlotte where the office is.
Mm-hmm.
Playing
Yeah.
havoc with the kids in college, playing havoc with my staff,
Yeah.
and I'm sure playing havoc with people trying to get to work safely, and not being wrecks. We just don't have that much snow and ice in Georgia and North Carolina.
I know. Well, I hate to say it, but like, there's got to be some part of you that's not glad to have all this snow that people can't drive in, but there's a part realizing, hey, I'm probably going to have an uptick in lead flow.
Usually, but it's an uptick in leads, but it's not an uptick in cases normally because a lot of
Ah,
times, like ice cases are tough because there's an element of act of God, right? Especially when
right.
people aren't prepared. Now, technically, there's liability, right? Because you could have been driving safer and slower and not crashed into somebody. But then there's also I bet I can convince a jury that it's not his fault, right? So
Right.
those are harder cases than like just your standard motor vehicle type stuff, right? And
Right.
and you get a lot of people where they really don't hit somebody else. They slide into poles or they slide into stuff, and then they call us saying like, "Hey, can you do anything to help me?" I'm like, "No, dude, I can't help you. That there's ice on the road."
I'm going to
Uh,
sue the pole. Yep, we're gonna hold the pole liable for this.
but then you get issues though where like they're arguing with insurance companies and people don't have deductibles. So I mean, it's really we spend a lot of time talking to people after these, but not a lot of time actually being able to quote help people the way we make money. Now,
That actually makes sense. See, I was wrong. So I was thinking, hey, there's a side of this that might be good, but I'm like, yeah, nope, never mind. Cancel on that one.
and
So
some of that depends on the state you're in, right? Like
right,
Georgia has no contrib where North Carolina does, so North Carolina's tougher. Really in that area a lot. Georgia's better. But then you sort of get into did you exercise reasonable caution, right? Like we run into that
right.
when people slip on ice near
Mm-hmm.
stores and they're like, well, it's the same as rain, right? You knew it was cold. You knew there
Yeah,
might be ice down there. Why weren't you being safe? Now,
yeah,
that's not a blanket thing, but it definitely impacts things. So,
yeah. No, it
uh,
makes sense. What's interesting, this actually kind of leads right into our conversation today on today's show. But if you haven't been following along, we are on part six of the how to break through these invisible ceilings that are keeping you stuck and not being able to scale. So if you haven't listened to the previous episodes, I would go back 5 episodes, start at episode 1 so that you can build into it. But today's topic is one would get exposed in a situation like what you're dealing with right now, Shane. And a lot of you guys listening will deal with this same problem when you're no longer being able to be there to insert yourself and to basically be the blanket over all your systems and processes. It exposes how well you've delegated into these systems and processes,
and
right? And how, yeah,
and I'm just gonna say, yeah, and that's a huge. Most of us think we're better at it than we are. Is what I'm gonna say, right?
yeah,
And and delegating versus abdicating versus I call it puppet mastery, right? When
yep,
you're not really delegating anything. You're just delegating some of the work, and you're controlling people and doing everything. Which I was a great at this, right? I was
mm-hmm,
a great puppet master for years, um, until I realized it was causing me to burn out. I was holding things up. It was a huge issue for me, and I think it hits a lot of Type A people, right? Like a lot of our listeners and law firm owners. I mean,
mm-hmm,
they think I can do it better if I delegate it down to somebody else. They screw it up every time, so why delegate anything, right? Just keep it
yep,
all tight, and that it keeps you from growing. It keeps you from growing, or it keeps you from enjoying life. I mean, or both.
yeah. Well, and one of the big ways that we think we delegate, but we're not actually delegating, even though we think we are, is that we will still be required as the owner of the firm to actually make the decision.
Right.
So you don't give your team authority to actually make any moves without you. So even when you you literally are the puppet master. You're
That's
like,
the puppet master syndrome, right? I mean,
yep. You're like, yes, no, I'm because a lot of guys that I've talked to in this space, they like to think they delegate, and they actually get defensive when I call them out on it, because they're like, no, I'm doing a good job. I got my operations person, and I've got my sales intake person. I've got, right. They'll go through the list of all these people, and here's all the things, and they report to me, and blah blah blah. But ultimately, it comes back to, I'm like, can these guys even make a decision without you? Like, if you get hit by a truck and you're in the hospital for the next month, what happens? Do these people even know how to choose something that would be productive, or have you been the one doing it the whole time? And I think that's where I think it's the hard part, right? It's like not being able to trust that, hey, delegation, yeah, you're going to monitor and you pay attention, but giving them the actual authority to make a decision without you.
And I think so many of us, we hear this, right? And we think, okay, now I've got to do this. But, or they think, well, it's an all or none, right? Like, I've got to either totally delegate authority to them or not. And a big issue I see is like office supplies, right? In a small office, I've seen people who they're the final authority on what kind of pen to buy.
Right.
Right? Or whether we need to reorder something or not, or every single detail, when really you can delegate authority up to $100, up to $500, up to $5,000. At one time in my firm, I had delegated up to $5,000. Right? Like, you guys can spend $5,000 without even talking to me. I don't want to hear it. And the number doesn't really matter as long as you put that in place, because you're going to grow that number as you get bigger.
Yep.
I mean,
yeah. And there's certain areas, but it's really being able to, and I think the hardest part about that is you feel like you're actually losing control. And I guess in some respect you kind of are, but that is a process you have to go through if you actually want to scale. Right? You become the clearest bottleneck there was, is if you cannot allow others to make these decisions. Who would you say, or what would you say was the hardest thing for you as you kind of found yourself growing and scaling your firm? Like, what were some of the things that were harder for you to let go of?
A hard one was like getting out of a case, and it's where we've already invested the resources to get do the marketing. We've invested the payroll time to work that case, and everybody's time and energy, and even sign liens and things like that, and allow the team to get out of the case because the lawyer said there's nothing here. Right? That was a huge, hard one for me. And I still struggle with it, right? Even over certain tiers of injuries, I'm like, okay, I want a bunch of eyes on this thing, right? I don't want one lawyer making the decision there's nothing there, because sometimes you you just don't see it, right? So it's like, I want more eyes, but it didn't all have to come to me. That was a huge one.
Yeah.
I would say money is another big one, and it's spending money, but also keeping track of the money. You and I have talked. I mean, my wife is still involved in the money issue in my firm, even down to signing checks, right? Like, signing checks was a huge thing for me to get rid of, and I'm not sure. I'm pretty slow to get rid of that one. Right? Yeah. I mean, you and I have talked about. I mean,
yeah, we literally just talked about it this week.
We did, right? this week or last week, and you're like, you're at. You're over $20 million in revenue, not in fee, not even in settlements and stuff, but in revenue to my firm, fees. And my wife still signs every single check that comes in, right? Or every single check that gets issued out to clients. And it's like, is it time to delegate that? Maybe, maybe not. I think it's time when my son comes to work in the office versus, so that's a huge issue.
When I think looking at it, there's you're going to have issues, like you're going to have things like that, and I think the money one is that everybody will kind of understand and justify. But even your firm, right, to grow to a certain, as it continues to grow and scale, I mean, some of the targets you have set for yourself this year, you get to the end of this year, the end of 2028, as you continue to move, even that task will have to be delegated, or it will become an issue.
And it, like we say, though, it's not an all or nothing, right? Like,
no.
I delegated the first money issue I delegated down was probably payroll, actually. The beginning, I wrote the check. I mean, I actually figured out payroll, right? I had one of those cheap little apps, plugged in somebody's hours, and it told me how much went to the government, how much went to them, kind of deal. And I would write the checks, and then I would write all the expense checks. So every medical record we did, I would write a check for. And then I did all the settlement stuff, right, with the IOLTA accounts and escrow. And I realized one Friday, I was like, holy cow, it's 12:30. All I've done is write checks today. This is a terrible use of my time. I didn't generate any new money. I didn't sign any new cases. I did nothing but write checks. And I was like, this has got to stop. And that's when I first brought my wife in, right? And we delegated down our expense account to my sister-in-law when she worked for me. And that was the first, like, outside of me and my wife, it went to somebody. And, and that delegated that down, right? Because we kept a minimal amount of money in that account. She was right. Most of the time that was $5,000 or $10,000 a month worth of stuff. And she could actually sign those. And there was no money in the account. I mean, and maybe to some people, $10,000 is a lot, but it really wasn't, right?
Right.
There's a limited amount of damage that could do if something happened.
Yeah.
So we delegated that down, and then my wife took over more responsibilities, and signers on the checks. But even that we've delegated down somewhat. You've also shifted more to, charging things on the Amex, right?
Right.
Like I've got an accounting person who can charge things in the Amex. My marketing person has authority to charge things in the Amex, and you can put limits on those cards, right? I don't know if everybody knows that. You can give an employee a $5,000 Amex limit card.
Yep.
There's a limited amount of damage that can happen no matter what, right? There's a safety net.
Yep.
And
I love doing it that way. One of my brands we ran, and every guy, we called him our event director, but every one of them that would go out to, across the country to different events, they each had an American Express, and all of them had a $10,000 limit on the card itself. So the account itself, we could pretty much do whatever we wanted,
right.
But their card was limited to 10,000, and they needed somewhere around that, probably closer to 5 or 6 on an event. But it was exactly what you're talking about. It was creating the training wheels. Because when we first started doing it, I was having these directors would call me and be like, hey, I've got this purchase. I need to do this thing. And I'm like, yes, approved. And I ended up we got busy enough that I ended up just being on the damn phone for like all day, just saying, yes, spend the money. Yes, spend the money. And finally I was like, oh my gosh, I'm losing my mind.
And that's usually, we have one of those moments, right? Where you're like, holy cow, I've just burned 4 hours, 8 hours doing something that didn't generate any revenue at all. It was just a control issue.
Yep.
And, that was when I gave some to my sister-in-law, who was my office manager at the time. I brought my wife in. We started outsourcing payroll, right? Some of those tasks, and even you outsource payroll, you still have to approve stuff.
Yep.
But it's, you can delegate that down, right? Like in my firm now, we've got an admin who, she's in charge of getting all the numbers and doing all the payroll. And then she's got somebody else who double checks it. And then it goes to the bookkeeper, the accounting firm who does all our payroll. It all happens. It's delegated down. And then I'm a firm believer in you need a check though. And that check means some number needs to be on a slide somewhere that comes to management to take a look at it. And I think that's the key difference in delegation versus abdication, right?
Yep.
Abdication is my hands are washed, just make it happen. I never need to know anything at all about it. And that's when you get things mess up and you get hosed at some point in time. And it's happened to me a couple of times.
Well, it's like if you give people that freedom, you give people too much rope, even honest people will make dumb decisions. And sometimes dishonest things. It'll happen. So you have to, and so anything, even if we're not talking about just about the money and we're talking about just other tasks, people's laziness will find its way out if you don't monitor and check and verify that they're doing. And I think that leads us into, like, once you've identified that, hey, I have to actually give them authority. They truly have to have authority to make this decision. I'm still watching it, but they've got the authority to go and do, and I'll course correct along the way if I need to. But then it comes down to, like, how are you delegating? Meaning, okay, cool, you got authority, and I think one of the big ones too is a lot of times we'll delegate tasks, but we won't delegate outcomes. And by delegating a task, you actually haven't given them authority because they're not now being managed based upon the outcome of the project or whatever they're working on. You're managing the specific tasks involved, which means you still have to be there, and you're still you bottleneck as you're managing the task as opposed to an outcome.
And Trevor, are you saying it's possible I could be critiquing somebody and be getting pissed off because they didn't do it exactly the way I wanted to do it, even though they got the exact same result. They just did it a different way. Is that sort of what you're saying there?
100%. And I'll tell you what, I'm an arrogant guy. I'll admit it. I'm not afraid to say it. And I've had the hardest time with this because my way is the right way.
Yeah.
I know how to do it like I did it exactly the same way, and you'll get right. And I remember one time I sat there, and my wife was actually the one that pointed out to me, and I was ripping somebody's ass because I was just so frustrated that they weren't doing it the way I did it. And she just asked me this. She didn't even understand this really. She just asked me. She's all, well, when he's done, is it as good as what you do it? And I'm like, it's pretty damn close. She said, so why does it matter that he does it like that?
Well,
He's the one doing it, not you. And I'm like, well, I didn't even have an answer for it. I mean, I remember sitting there and I was so frustrated, and then my wife was speaking real truth into me. So all of you guys that are married, listen to the show, whether it's a wife or a husband, like, you know what I'm talking about. Your spouse has a way of speaking some truth into you, your soul. So you like get it, pull it in, and you're like, okay. Right. And but it was really hard for me because I wanted to manage the tasks. And that, again, this chaos, you can't do that.
And it's hard to do. It's hard not to dig in, especially when you've been the superhero of your firm, right? The firm is built around you. You make all the key decisions. You built it to whatever level you're at right now. To think, holy cow, somebody else could come in and do it a different way. You know, right? They could do it. I mean, because clearly your way worked. It got you where you're at. So they should just do it that way.
But I think one of those things too, Shane, is the fact that if you constantly control every mechanism when you delegate anything down, you're not allowing their brilliance to shine through and actually know that they might do it better.
I know, and that's a hard thing to accept, right?
100%.
And what's key is sometimes it doesn't even matter. Like you say, it doesn't even matter. The task gets done the same way. It's just different. And that's the hard part, is accepting, or maybe it doesn't get done as well as you, which no surprise, right? You're the one who built the law firm. You started it. You took those risks. You've got an undergrad degree. You've got a law degree. You've got experience. Whatever it is, you've got more experience than that low level, maybe a lower level staff member. I mean, it depends on how big your organization is, obviously, and what level they are. But that they could be better, or that they could do an 80 to 90% just as good a job, right? And does that extra 10% even matter?
Usually not.
I mean, most of the time, no, right? I mean,
no, usually not. Depends on what the area is, but the reality is the amount of stress and the lack of growth that you're allowed to do outside of that area or that thing is significantly decreased when you're spending all your time inside the weeds. And I think that's the big distinction too. When we even talk about delegation, the goal is to get things off of your plate that you can then go spend time actually working on the things that will grow and scale the firm.
Yeah, and Trevor, you just got me thinking, one of the key areas, right? One of the first things you ought to delegate is your taxes, right? And I see this, and I was thinking payroll, because that's lawyers screw this up, right? Because they don't know all the payroll laws, but it's really the taxes. I talked to one guy, and I kid you not, it was like April, and I'm like, what are you doing? And he goes, I'm working on my business taxes. I'm like, you're gathering documents? He goes, no, I'm doing them all. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? You know, right? Like, talk about finding somebody who's better at that job than you. That's an easy first step to outsource, right? Because you don't understand the complexity, you don't know it, or they're doing TurboTax and they run a $4 million business. I'm like, dude, what are you doing, man?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it comes down to the mindset, right? This is really delegation is as a mindset thing, much more so than it is a tactic thing, right? It's not like obviously we work with clients and we'll give them kind of, hey, you need to delegate these tasks. It's very obvious this is a problem. Delegate this. So there are tactics involved, but it's much more of a mindset here because once you understand that, and then you'll do that, you'll start to see things like taxes, and you'll be like, yeah, I never want to touch these again.
Right.
Like any of those things. Payroll, now.
And a huge part, one of the taxes we talk is like your hourly wage, right? What's an hour of your time worth, right? Not only what's it worth, but also like how much revenue are you supposed to generate for your business? right? And I talk to people about that. It's not just your hourly wage. It's how much revenue are you expected? Like my COO, right? He's expected to generate, a certain amount of revenue above and beyond his pay. My operations person, same thing. My lawyers, I mean, all of them are, and it's 3 to 5 times what you're paying them. So that's really the hourly rate for them, But
Yep, 100%.
I agree. Delegation 100% is a mindset thing, and it's something if you want to grow and scale and enjoy your dang life, you got to figure that out.
Yep. The last thing I want to touch on before we wrap today on delegation is you've got to set a standard as well. So, right, you identify that, hey, I've got to delegate. I've got to delegate these tasks and get out of the decision-making, give them authority. I've got to manage off of the outcome. But now I've also got to make sure I'm very clear on what done means, what is the standard. Look, so when I delegate something out, and this mistake, I experienced it so many times, and I'm sure I still do from time to time. Actually, I caught myself doing it today when I realized somebody wasn't performing, and I'm like, oh, crap. I can't even blame them because at the end of the day, I didn't tell them this is what I wanted done. Even though I'm in my mind, I'm like, I wish you would have just done this on your own. But then I'm like, they're not just going to do it on their own. They need to know what is the standard and what does done mean when you say do this project and you're going to manage off that outcome. And this, I think, we screw it up all the time when you've got your firm and you're delegating a task out, is you think you're being clear on what the desired outcome is and so the steps along the way to get there, but they are not clear. And so you end up in this weird spiral where they come to you and they say, well, the task is done. And then you're looking at them and you're going like, no, it's not.
Right.
Not even close. Like, what is happening here? Or they're working on it. You come just kind of poke your head into the process. And you're like, what the hell is going on? What are you guys doing over there? Like, you're supposed to be right here, and now you're hanging out over there. Like, this doesn't even make sense. And it's not the person's fault. That's the hard part. And I think this is what we want to blame the people. We want to blame our employees and be like, well, it's you. You did it.
I'm going to chime in on that. One, you also got to have a deadline, right? When is it supposed to be done by? And as leaders, we forget that, right? Because I want it done. I won't even tell people that I want it done tomorrow. I'll be like, get to work on this, get it done. Right. And to me, that means tomorrow. And tomorrow, they're like, no, I was doing that on Monday, right? So that's one. Two, I think asking them, making sure they understand where this task fits in the overall picture, right? Because sometimes they change stuff. You delegate that authority. They change stuff because in their department it doesn't matter, but it impacts everything else. So you got to have some level of knowing everything that's going on. And third, we did an experiment where we would delegate stuff and we would explain stuff to people, and they're like, okay, explain back to me what I asked you to do and what the outcome is. And 50% of the time, it was different.
Yep. And isn't that wild? That's the part right there that gets me, because the question, what did you just hear me say? Yep. Right? Is like, write that down, everybody. That question will save you.
That's what you got to take away from this right there, is that. Because
that's it. Because if you can ask that question, but I'm telling you, when I get people's responses on that sometimes, there's a part of me that I'm like, I don't even have words. I'm just sitting there like...
No, but it's clearly you. You failed.
Exactly.
I had the conversation. We had intelligent people in the room, all high-level people making 6 figures. And I talk about it, and then I was like, all right, what did you hear from me? Totally different. I'm like, whoa, no. Clearly I screwed that up, right? Because everybody in this room is smart. And they just heard different things,
Yep.
And we did it all day, and 50% ratio, 50%.
Oh, yeah, and the natural reaction, guys, is to blame them.
Yep.
Right? When they don't understand, they must just be dumb. They're this way or that. No, you're a poor communicator.
Well, if you do it all day long, I'll tell you there's going to be one common denominator in that situation, and it's going to be you.
Yep, always, every time you. So, like, what I want you to do from today's show, there's really is, we could spend time on almost each one of the little segments of delegation, and delegation, we'll definitely revisit it again throughout the shows, but because there's a lot that goes into this. But one thing I want you to do is I want you to identify just one thing that you are currently taking full ownership responsibility for that you need to let it go. right? One area, and you don't have to delegate the whole thing. Could be in the middle of a part of the process. But there's one decision that you keeping your hand in. And if you're the guy who's still deciding which type of pens or pencils to buy, well, maybe you should start there. I don't want you to try to delegate in the whole thing, but just literally look at the way you operate right now. What's one task? And it's pretty easy. You should be able to find one in about 2 or 3 seconds of thinking about it, a task that you know is not a money-making activity, doesn't drive revenue, and it's not driving growth, but you still have your hands in it. And you're ludicrous if you think you can keep your hands in it and actually scale to where you want to scale. So find that one thing and then take one action towards delegation. Who are you going to delegate it to? How are you going to measure the outcome of this delegation, right? And what is the standard operating procedure of how it's going to be? When do you want it? All the things we talked about today, just pick one thing. This little thing will take you about 5 minutes to come up with and then to put into place. But I can promise you, start down this process, it'll start training your mind to actually get to where you become a delegation master. And the best leaders in the world are the ones who don't really have to work in the business at all. Their entire time, all day, is spent working on the business and managing systems, processes, and routines. They're never the ones doing the doing. They're the ones managing the process, but you got to start here. You don't start here, you stay the bottleneck forever. So, any final thoughts, Shane, as we wrap today?
No, work on it. You're not as good at delegating as you think you are. If you think you're an expert at it, you're probably abdicating.
Yep, 100%. 100%. All right, appreciate you guys being listeners to today's show. If you got any value from today's show, which I know you did, go ahead and share this show up with somebody that you know. Give us a like and a subscribe, depending on where it is you're watching or listening to our show. We appreciate you guys. Our show doesn't grow, and we don't get to help other attorneys just like you unless you guys help us by getting this out in front of them. So do that. That's the only thing we ask from you guys. If you want help with any of the processes, anything we talk about here on the show, you can always jump into legaledgecoaching.com, and there's a little button there where you can actually fill out some information and get on a scheduled call with me where we will dive deep into your firm and help you implement all the things we talk about here on the show. That being said, that brings us to a wrap of today's show. Have a fantastic rest of your day.